Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Profit Builder Unscripted. If you have people that you're hiring to join your team, or if you're embarking on something new in your life, this is an episode that you absolutely want to listen to. All right, let's jump in. I used to have this friend text to every time I would be around Tex, and he would introduce me, and it was a professional setting, so I knew him from a business perspective. Every time I was in a group with him and he was introducing me to somebody else, I would always marvel at how Tex would introduce me. He would say just such kind and caring and glowing things about me and who I was and how I did what I do and the difference that I make in the world. And, even just listening to Tex, I would feel better about myself. I would feel like I was a better human being. And what I noticed is he would do that with other people too, how he introduced other people. It would be just like he would look to and speak to the best of who that human being was, whoever they were. And what I noticed is that being around Tex, how he would talk about other people absolutely framed and influenced how I saw those other people. Like I just when Tex would introduce somebody to me, and he would talk about them as being somebody who was very competent or capable or really smart about this or really, thoughtful about that or whatever he would say, I would notice that that kind of went in for me as a way of how I saw and how I viewed that person. Like I believed that that was true about who that person was, and how Tex would introduce me to them influenced as a result how I engaged with that person. The automatic always assumptions that I made about who that person was. And I love that about him. And it was many years ago when Tex and I first became friends and I got to know him. And I really have it stuck with me a lot over these many years about how do we frame people, or how do we speak about other people in a way that influences how other people see them? Do we look at what's negative about somebody or what's not working, or do we look first to speak to what's wonderful about somebody and what's really great about them? And the reason I bring this up now is because I had this experience a couple weeks ago where I was around a couple of friends. One of them, we'll call him Joe. So I was around Joe, and he's somebody that I've known for quite a while. And there's certain things about him that I find to be kind of quirky. But a lot of times I just kind of let it roll off and I go, Joe's just being Joe. But this particular week, I found myself spending more time around him, and I was irritated. I was really like noticing all the things that I didn't like about him, or that I thought were like that he could have been doing better or could have been doing differently. And as it turns out, a few days later, I'm having a conversation with this other friend of mine, Andrew, and I was describing to Andrew my sort of assessments about Joe and how he was. And then Andrew proceeded to say, "Man, I really hear what you're talking about. But let me tell you about some other things that I understand and know about what's going on with Joe in his life, and some of the things that he's struggling with, and some of the challenges that he's having, and some of the demons he's dealing with right now that are really that he's just really struggling with." And as I listened to Andrew describe to me what was going on with Joe, all of a sudden my view of Joe, which would before was kind of like this, started to like open up, and I'm like, oh, like there's something else completely going on with Joe that I had no awareness of. Or and it's just like at that moment I went, wow, how often is it that we have these judgments and assessments about people that when we don't fully understand what's actually going on in their world, and that we want to lead a conversation as I started to do with Andrew with these judgments and assessments, as opposed to being really curious about, hey, I wonder what's going on with Joe. He's being particularly obnoxious. Like, what's going on with him? And it just like, and the reason I'm sharing this with you, because I think that we do that a lot as human beings, is that we don't stop long enough to ask more questions, to find out what's going on with somebody else before we're so quick and so instantly willing to judge them, to assess them, to criticize, to look for what's wrong. And I I relearned an important lesson in that whole exchange with Joe and Andrew about we don't necessarily know what somebody's story is, and we don't know what's necessarily going on with them. And rather than be defensive, or rather than be critical or judgmental, sometimes it's more useful to stop and ask some more questions. And as a result of my conversation with Andrew, I started to see a whole different way of engaging with Joe that was more compassionate, that was more caring. And now some of what was going on with Joe, I know that he didn't really want to talk about. That wasn't my business to ask about it. If he wanted to share it, he would have. But it gave me more compassion for him, and it made me go, oh, okay, how can I engage with Joe in a way that is more loving, caring, supportive of him right now, that will just let him know that he's not alone, to let him know that he's got a support system out here, to let him know that he's not being judged. Because truthfully, when we're around other people, let's face it, right? We've all probably experienced this, you have too, where when you're around somebody and you know that they're being kind of judgmental of you, or they're being disapproving of you, we kind of sense that, right? And at some level, I think that Joe probably sensed that about me. And so I really, I have since then just made more of an effort. First of all, it completely changed my opinion, right? And my perspective, and a lot of the judgments fell away. But secondly, it's had me engaging with Joe differently, and and hopefully making a difference in his life. I mean, my goal in life is to have it be that people who engage with me, that their lives are better and enriched as a result of it. That's just a core value of mine. And my goal is that people feel better being around me, and that their lives have been lifted up. Because I fundamentally believe that human beings that we're all always doing the best that we can, that we all want to feel valued, we want to feel seen, heard, we want to feel like we matter, that we all fundamentally want to be loved and cared for, right? And I believe that about all of us. And when I'm not seeing people for that, and I'm operating with people out of from a place of judgment or assessment, or frustration or expectation, then I'm not really doing a very good job of that. And as much as empowering people and supporting people and caring about people and having people feel better about themselves being around me is a core value of mine, clearly by this example, I wasn't living from that place. I wasn't coming from that place with Joe. And I so appreciated Andrew being willing to have the courage to say to me, hey, but there's something else going on that you don't really understand. So, you know what? I share this with you because we have a shared experience as human beings. And how we engage with people, or how we speak about people, frames not only how we interact with other people, but it also frames how other people interact with those people. And just like my friend Text was so mindful about how he introduced people to other people, and that it set this framework or perspective of, wow, that's who that person is. How often do we do that in our lives with the people in our lives? And how often are we so quick to judge or assume that we know what's actually going on? So my invitation to you today And my invitation to myself as I go forward is, let's pay more attention. What's the conversation that we're having? And are we framing a conversation with somebody and about somebody that's powerful or disempowering? And understanding that the words that we use about other people very much influences how people around them see them and perceive them and interact with them. And again, we're all doing the very best we can. And if we knew another way to do it, we would. And sometimes our behavior isn't the best. But what I know about Joe is that, he's doing the very best that he can. And if he knew another way to do it right now, he would. So, um, yeah, I hope you found some insight in this. I know that this whole experience really has been a great reminder to me about staying true to who it is that I want to be and how I want to engage with the world. And yeah, so I'm going to close at that. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being you and being part of this community. And thank you for being a learner. If you're here and you're listening to this, you're somebody who is looking to grow, whether that's as a human being, a business leader, a business owner, a leader, whatever. That you're investing in yourself. And so I acknowledge you for that. I think it's awesome. And I am so grateful that you let me be on this journey with you, of learning and growing and discovering. And thanks for being part of the community. And I look forward to seeing you next time on the Profit Builder Unscripted.